Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In this video, I'm going to be installing a garberator and repiping a kitchen sink drain. So the garberator has stopped working. All it does is create a humming noise, but it doesn't turn. And the piping for this sink is absolutely atrocious. It looks like it was a Friday afternoon job or a first year apprentice, but it is horribly done. Now, I've already repiped a kitchen sink drain similar to this before, but it's the exact same problem where the drain is not serviceable. You can't take it apart easily if you have to because they want to save one fitting. But we're gonna fix everything here and make sure everything is back up and running. So what we'll do now is look at our setup. So this is the garberator and the kitchen piping. So you see how the piping comes off horizontally from the garberator on the right. So this is not exactly serviceable. It's hard to take apart, and the trap is actually sitting at the very bottom of the cabinet, which makes it impossible to remove the way it is. So what we'll do now is material and tools. Alright, so this is the materials list. So this is a Badger brand garberator. I have installed more of these in my life than anything else. This is a 1/3 horsepower. They do have bigger models, but I think for the most part, a 1/3 horsepower is more than enough for a typical home. ABS pipe, ABS glue, Plumbers putty, 1.5 T, 1.5 union trap, 1.5 90, 1.5 slip adapter, and a couple 1.5 45s. Guys, this is what I need for material on this job. So what we'll do now is a tools list. Alright, this is a tools list. So I have my finishing kit. So it'll have channel locks, wire strippers, whatever else I might need. Work light, extension cord, cordless kit. I probably only need the drill plus bits. Hacksaw, container, and then I have my pouch. So hammer, screwdrivers, level, measuring tape, and whatever else I might need on this job. Guys, this is the tools list for this job, so let's get started. So put a level between the 45 and the trap. So the level right now is level, and it needs another 1/4 inch. So between the 45 and the trap, the pipe is back grading by about 3/4 of an inch, and you will see the grease buildup because of it. I'm going to start by cutting the pipe between the left and right compartment of the sink. This is not serviceable the way it is, so instead of stressing everything and possibly breaking something, I'm just going to cut right through it. As I said earlier on, the trap is so low that it's not removable, so I need to cut just below the T so I'm able to unthread the trap and take out the drainage. So now I'm going to take a container and undo the nut on the trap. So keep in mind that the piping is reverse sloping, it's back grading. So after I take the trap off, there's still going to be water that is going to be dripping into the container because it's sloping the wrong way. Also, based on the amount of water that is dripping, that is an indication that there's a blockage in the pipe, because if there was no blockage, the dripping would stop fairly quickly. This wound up dripping for over a minute, so to save your guys' sanity, I just sped this up. But this also shows the amount of blockage in the pipe. So there's a 45 on this side of the cabinet and also on the opposite side of the cabinet. Since it's all glued together, there's no way to change any angle, so the 45 needs to be cut out. Here we see how the horizontal piece of pipe is sloping the wrong way, but there's a 3x2 mechanical joint in the wall. So this nut that I'm pointing to, this needs to be loosened off so the pipe can be removed. So this is the grease buildup from 3 feet worth of pipe. Grease is going to build up regardless, but when it's sloping the wrong way, the piping, this is how much buildup you're going to get in such a short run. And this is the length of pipe minus a few inches that all this grease came from. Next, the dishwasher drain can be removed from the garberator. So there is a spring clamp that has 2 wings on it. Take a pair of channel locks and just compress the 2 together and slide it back. I don't think I've ever had any major problems getting this clamp off. With the clamp removed, just pull off the dishwasher drain and then make sure to also unplug the garberator from the outlet. The pipe and slip adapter remaining on the garberator, I'm going to remove it and reuse it on the new drain. Here's the key from the new garberator. So the key fits into one of the rings that holds the garberator onto the collar. So I will use a second screwdriver, and that'll make it easier to twist the garberator off from the collar attached to the sink. When removing the garberator, be aware that it's not exactly the lightest thing in the world, so be prepared for the weight. So there are 3 screws that hold on the collar to the bracket that is connected to the sink. So the old one was Torx, but the new ones, as in like I guess the last 10 years, have always been Phillips, but the old one was a Torx. With the screws removed, there is a steel ring that is keeping the collar onto the bracket. So this ring I'm pointing to needs to be removed. If you can't do it by hand, then grab a screwdriver, a flathead, and then gently just pry it off. But it shouldn't be too bad to take off unless it's horribly rusted together. Push from the bottom, and then the center bracket piece will just come out. So wipe the putty that is left on the inside of the sink. You may need a flathead screwdriver or a knife if it's really stuck or brittle, but for the most part, putty is really easy to take apart, and that is why I am pro putty over silicone in this case. Remember, whether you're using a screwdriver or a knife, be careful not to scratch the sink because it may cause a leak in the future. So here are the parts. We have Insinkinator at the top. So there's a couple parts to this. There's the bottom bracket. There is a plate, the top part that goes into the sink, and then there is the steel ring. So to take it apart, loosen off the 3 screws. Here are the 4 pieces for the garburator to be mounted, and then this cardboard ring, I always get rid of it because to me it serves no purpose. Now using putty, I'm going to put a bead of putty on the bottom side of this ring, and that is going to be the actual water seal between the sink and the garburator. When installing putty, I roll it where it is going to be in a cylindrical shape, and then I push it on, and I push it where I will try to extend it a little bit. Guys, check out my other videos if it doesn't quite make sense to you, but there is a thing as putting on too much because you'll have too big of a space, and then if you put on too little, you're going to have a leak. So now this is ready to be installed, and this is the way I'm going to install it. When installing this inner ring, make sure that it's centered in the hole of the sink. Make sure that the writing at the top that I'm illuminating now is straight, and also give the ring a push to help distribute the putty. When the screws get tightened up, that will suck the ring down and squeeze out the putty later on. Now it's time to install the remaining pieces. So the plate goes on next, the bracket with the screws follows, and then the last piece to go on is the steel ring. The steel ring will hold the other 2 parts together. If you have problems getting the steel ring on, you can push from the inside, the inner ring, as you see my fingers, and then you can get the steel ring on. If you still have problems, you can put some weight, like the new garburator, on the internal ring, and that's going to help hold it down to get the steel ring into the groove. With all the parts now loosely attached, the 3 screws can be tightened on. So the screws have to hit the plates. You can't just put them anywhere. Guys, check out the card for the undermount sink install that I noticed the garburator was installed incorrectly. But when you're tightening up the screws, go in a star pattern and make sure all the screws are tightened down together, and that's going to help to suck down the inner ring that's on the inside of the sink. Once the screws are tightened down, give the whole assembly a shake to make sure it's nice and tight, and then the putty that is squeezing out from the bottom, just clean that away so it looks better. So the top circle that is illuminated, that is the dishwasher hookup. If you do not have a dishwasher, do not break out this plug, but because there is a dishwasher with this setup, I'm going to take a flathead and a screwdriver and break out the plug. So to break out the plug, take a big flathead screwdriver and just tap it a couple times with a hammer. You don't have to hit it very hard. It's meant to be broken out. But once you break it out, make sure that you remove it from the inside of the garberator. So there's the plug. Make sure that you get it out before starting on the 90 for the drainage for the kitchen sink. So here are the parts for the drainage that connect to the ABS for the sink. So here's the 90. There is a bracket that goes on next, a rubber O-ring that will go between the 90 and the garburator itself. With the gasket in place, there are two short slot screws that need to be installed. So these are, I believe, 3/8. It is probably better to use a ratchet wrench than a flathead screwdriver, but either will work. So like with most other things when it comes to plumbing, make sure that you tighten the two back and forth. If you only tighten one side down and then go to the other side, you can pinch the gasket, causing a leak. Now we'll start on the electrical portion. So there's a plate underneath, and this has a Phillips screw holding the plate on. Remove the plate. Inside there are two wires, the black, white, and then there is a green ground screw that you're going to hook up power to. So for the power cord, we have three wires, green, white, and black. The green is the ground. I was taught by an electrician to do the ground first, do the neutral second, which is the white, and then do the hot, which is the black, last. So when you strip the wires back, strip back about a ½ inch, and because this has strands of copper, twist the strands of copper to make one wire. Do the same thing with the other wires. So put the power cord through the circular hole. There should be a clip, like a bracket, that the electrician would supply. Now, because I'm a plumber, I didn't realize this at the time. Normally, I would have taken it off the old garberator, but it wasn't there. So guys, be sure that you get this clip so you don't make my mistake. The black and white wires from the garberator are 14 gauge. So I'm cutting off the ends. I'm going to strip back a ½ inch and then once again twist the copper strands of wire together. With all the wires now ready to be connected, start with the ground. Put the ground wire underneath the head of the screw in a clockwise direction. That way when you tighten up this screw, that's going to bite the wire instead of unraveling it. The next is the neutral. Tie the two white wires together. Once that's done, put a wire connector over the marette and then tighten it down and then give it a tug. Do the same for the black. Once that is all done, the last thing that needs to be done is just the cover plate at the bottom of the garburator be reinstalled. So to reconnect the plate, slide under the head of the screw. The two divots is what's going to hold the cover plate in place. Once it's in the correct position, just tighten down the screw and you're done. So to install the garburator, there are the three rings. To the left of the rings, there are hooks. These hooks will slide along a channel, a groove that I'm pointing to here to install the garburator onto the bracket. When installing the garburator onto the bracket, make sure all three hooks catch the groove. It's very common to miss one of the hooks in the back because you can't see it. Also, the garburator is not exactly light, so that could be a contributing factor. But make sure that you catch all three of the hooks and then slide it to the top. Using the key and a screwdriver, turn the garburator so it goes up the channel and then it'll click into place. Right there, clicked into place. You'll feel it and hear it, but it has to click into place, otherwise it can shake itself loose. With the garburator attached to the bracket, it can spin freely. So spin the garburator so the dishwasher drain is in the back. Make sure that this drain is not sagging because that's where water will collect. So use channel locks and then slide the spring clamp over. You can probably follow the indentation on the rubber. Once the spring clamp is in the correct spot, give it a tug to make sure it's nice and solid. Now it's time to pipe the drain. So I would say probably have the 90 off the garberator probably in the back to save space in the cabinet. So what I'm doing is looking at what height I need for the T in between the two compartments. You can't see it, but what I'm doing is I'm looking at the bottom of the T to the trap arm coming from the cabinet to the left to make sure there's enough space for everything to fit. I've dry fit the T onto the vertical piece of pipe. So now that I have a mock-up, I'll be able to take a measurement for the horizontal piece between the garberator and the left compartment of the sink. So now I'm going to set the grade on the horizontal piece. So I'm going to take my increment level and I'm going to give it a minimum of 1/4 inch per foot. Once this is set, I'm going to hold up the slip adapter onto the brass tail piece, and then I'm going to figure out how long of a piece I need above the T. So this is what I'm holding up here. Now I can glue the two pieces of pipe, the T and the 90, together. So for the vertical piece of pipe on the left, I like to split the difference for the brass tail piece. So if it's 6 inches, then I will go 3 inches down. And that way you have play that you can move everything up and down as you need to. This is not a rule of thumb. This is just the way I like to do it. Now I'm going to confirm I have the grade that I want, assuming everything works out. Wipe both joints, and then we'll move on to the trap. So with the horizontal piece of pipe, confirm that you have proper grade, proper slope, and now the 45 can be glued on. So the trap can be spun to figure out what you need to do for alignment. So I've done this for so long, I just can generally eye it out fairly well. But if you can't, dry fit a piece on, and then you can mimic the trap to where you need to be. So here the dry fit piece of pipe in the T and the union can be spun around so you can align everything. So here's a view from the top and then another view from the side. You see how the two look like they line up fairly well. So a measurement now can be taken for the piece of pipe between the 45 and the trap. So I didn't show me gluing the piece of pipe onto the Union 90 for the trap. Guys, check out the card because there is a right way to do this so you don't destroy your trap. But with the piece of pipe cut and measured on, now it can be installed into the 45. So when the trap 90 has been glued on, take a level and then level the very bottom of the 90 as I'm demonstrating here. The alignment needs to be straight, otherwise, because this is a union and there's no gasket for the trap, you can have a leak if it's not aligned correctly. Before gluing the last joint, always dry fit to make sure that everything is going to fit properly. If you have to start straining things to get it to fit, then something needs to be adjusted. Here I actually cut the vertical piece of pipe slightly too long. Now the trap can be glued on, so glue the bottom of the T, glue the pipe, and then spin it into position, and then make sure that you tighten up the union trap nut right away. Tighten the union trap nut by hand, and then the two slip adapter nuts by hand as well. You should not need a wrench on these nuts. It should be hand tight. If you've done this correctly, you won't have an issue. So the last thing before testing is the putty that is squeezed out. Just make sure that you clean it all off. To test, fill up both compartments about halfway and then dump both compartments at the same time. Alright, with both compartments draining, check the glue joints for leaks. The 2x1.5 inch mechanical joint in the wall, and also take note at where the pipe goes into the cabinet. What they did is they drilled from the other side and then they broke out to the side of the cabinet. Guys, once again, check out the card to avoid this mistake. All right, this is everything done. So check for leaks. Run your hand around the slip adapters and the union trap. Also, turn on the garberator to make sure it works and it sounds normal. But with that in mind, what we'll do now is an overview of this job. All right, guys. So that concludes this job. So when it comes to Badger carburetors, I've installed more of these than anything else in my life. Waste King is another one that I've also installed, just not as often. But I'm fairly happy with Badgers. I don't hear too many complaints from them. Now, one thing, I have ran into this one time over the years. Once you install the garburator, make sure that you pay attention to the pitch of it running. If it changes pitch, what might have happened is that the garburator is loosened off the collar. I've only ever had this happen once, where the screws loosened off and then the actual garburator fell to the bottom of the cabinet. So that is the one thing that I do suggest that you be aware of. When you run the garburator, make sure that it sounds normal. If it starts to sound different, check to make sure that the garburator hasn't loosened off itself from the collar. The time on this job. The time was about 2 hours. I didn't run into any problems. There was a lot of space to work. So I'm very happy with the way this job turned out. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I didn't have the electrical bracket, whatever they call it. That is something that the electrician would always supply. So be aware, if you buy a garburator, it doesn't come with this bracket for the electrical. The cost of this job. The cost was about $180. So the garburator was the vast majority of the cost, and then the fittings, pipe, and glue was the rest of it. I don't consider this to be overly technical, but I don't think it's also a rookie's job either, because there's electrical and then the piping has to be arranged in such a way that water is going to drain out properly. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, till next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.